behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, ISAS, and the East Asian Institute, EAI, I warmly welcome you to the ISAS-EAI panel discussion on China-India relations, roles of the media and business. We will also witness the launch of the book titled China-India Economics, Challenges, Competition and Collaboration, authored by Dr. Amitendu Palit. To start off today's event, it is my pleasure to invite Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman of ISAS, to deliver welcome remarks.
Professor Wang, Professor Chien Srinivasan, my distinguished visitors from China, from India, from Canada, from Australia, all of you, I extend a warm welcome, plus, of course, my colleagues in ISAS and all my Singaporean friends. I think this is the first time we are having both a book launch as well as a panel discussion. But we have been organizing many events jointly with EAI. And I'm very thankful to EAI for their cooperation and collaboration. They have always been an excellent partner for us. We know a little bit about South Asia, and they know a lot about China. And it makes a very good sense for us to cooperate on a very important topic. China-India relations is a subject of tremendous interest, not only to ISAS, but to Singapore as well. Our former Foreign Minister, Mr. Giorgio, used to say that the most important relationship in Asia is India-China relations. I may add that it is also one of the oldest relationships in the world. China has progressed tremendously. India has progressed, but at a slower pace. There has been a deficit in the information or the understanding of the information by the two countries. There has been a gap, and this is where ISAS is trying to fill this gap so that both countries understand each other better. We have, I think in the month of April, we launched a book called Resurgent China, Perspectives from South Asia. We launched this book in New Delhi, and it was launched by the Vice President of India. It was a great, great success. Then, today we have had closed door session, a meeting for media, because we feel the role of the media is extremely important. China has become a major player in South Asia, and particularly in India. If you look at the power industry, you look at the capital industry, as a direct investor, China is doing extremely well. But the information gap remains, and that is our role to try to meet. So we launched a book in April. We are launching one today. We have a media discussion today, and sometime in November, we will be having a much bigger two-day conference on India-China, where scholars from both countries, outside the media, outside business, but scholars will come and interact. And we hope that will be a good occasion for them to understand each other. We give them a platform so that they can interact and meet each other. So once again, I think the interest of ISAS is to try and bridge the gap, information gap. Singapore has always had an interest in the relationship with South Asia and China. If you read Western histories of Singapore, you would learn only perhaps that Singapore started from 1819, when Sir Stamford Raffles took over this island. But if you read the book by my colleague, Director Professor Tan Tai Yong, he talks about Singapore's 700-year history. Now this history sees commerce moving from Europe, from the Middle East, from Africa to India and China, and probably passing through Singapore. Southeast Asia was a meeting place of Indian and Chinese traders together with the Arabs and others. But it was also a meeting place for the cultures of the two countries. And it still today is going to be an important venue for meeting of these two great countries. So we try and do what little we can. And today we have, as the compare said, two programs. One is the launch of a book by Dr. Amitendu Palit. And after that we have a panel discussion. And the panel discussion will have a group of very illustrious people. And then we have further discussions after that. I want to thank you for spending this afternoon with us, and we hope you will find the time to spend worthwhile. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Palit. I would now like to invite Dr. Amitendu Palit, Head of Partnership and Program, and visiting Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies, to give an introduction to his book, China-India Economics, Challenges, Competition and Collaboration.
Thank you very much, Tim Kim, and I join Chairman ISAS Ambassador in welcoming you all to today's event. Exactly a year ago, I could not even visualize that the book would be launched today, in the third week of May 2012, because I was trying to furiously finish off the deadline that I had given to my publishers. But things often happen in unexpected manners, so I guess it has taken a good turn. The book is ready, available in public domain. Why this book? I think the first thing that I'd like to submit is that this is a book that is done with a comparative perspective, but it stays away from a very large and exhaustive literature prevailing in the world that tries to see whether India can catch up with China, at what stage and level and what point in time in history will China and India converge to becoming most dominant entities in the world economy. This book instead focuses on one aspect of the China and India economics which not many talk about, and that is the bilateral economic relationship between the two countries. Why is that important? It is probably by itself purely in terms of its size not the most important relationship in the world till now. But it does become interesting if one looks at some very simple statistic. These are two countries who were trading at barely about $1 billion 10 years ago. And today, that trade relationship is close to $75 billion, only by official statistics. And there is a considerable amount of unofficial economic activity which goes underreported in both the countries. And there is every reason to assume that this relationship is almost close to $100 billion right now. A $100 billion trade relationship is probably 1/3 of the world's largest bilateral trade relationship, that is between China and Europe. But even at $100 billion, this relationship is almost as much as the size of the Bangladesh economy or the Iraqi economy. And the rate at which it is progressing, one can safely presume that in 10 to 15 years' time, it will probably become one of the most significant bilateral economic relationships in the world, if not the most significant relationship. What this book tries to do is to look at the global context of the China-India economic relationship. And what it starts off by identifying is that in a way, China and India occupy a very unique position in the world economy. They are now both figuring in the top 10 largest economies of the world. Yet, both are distinct by the fact that they are developing economies and have considerable amount of an unfinished development agenda. Both have become high growth economies, but their growth outcomes and development outcomes have been very distinct. In that sense, both have a long way to travel and both have challenges that are common. Many of these challenges are challenges which they probably did not envisage 10 or 15 years ago, but now they have become considerably large challenges, particularly with respect to issues like urbanization, management of water, management of land, access to energy, so on and so forth. This book pins itself on 3 C's, and the first C are a set of common challenges which both these countries face. And then the instincts and impulses which these challenges produce. A large part of these instincts are competitive by nature, and that is getting reflected in the race for hydrocarbon assets between the 2 countries in different parts of the world, in their race for entering into bilateral trade agreements with various partners, and a large number of other peripheries. So that is probably the second of the C's which will have a bearing on this relationship. But finally, the third C, and that is where this book tries to offer an alternative perspective. Going in terms of mainstream economic explanations, whatever is happening in China and India cannot be explained, because these are 2 countries with tremendous amount of imperfections which are not accommodable in mainstream economic explanations, and they cannot really explain the kind of growth which these 2 countries have had over the last 10 to 15 years. And that is where their development experiences are unique, and they need to talk to each other and discuss a lot more with each other for figuring out the ways and means of tackling their common challenges. So the third C that this book draws upon is collaboration. It is indeed these 3 C's, the challenges, competition, and collaboration, which this book believes will determine the future course of this relationship, which can become one of the most important economic relationships in the world. And within the domain of these 3 C's, the book tries to address another question, which probably is the mother of all questions. Will politics, or rather bad politics, overcome the good economics that exists between these 2 countries at this point in time? As an economist and as an author, conscious of the commercial implications, I will not reveal what is the answer to this question that the book possesses. What I will now shift on to is a very pleasant responsibility, and that is thanking a lot of people. Even though this book is eventually getting identified with one single author, a book is always a collective effort. I begin by thanking the institute which made this book possible, the Institute of South Asian Studies, where Ambassador Gopinath Pillai and our director, Professor Kantai Yong, have been very generous and very committed supporters of research, and they have allowed us, if I could be permitted to say so, allowed us to do whatever we want without coming in our ways, and particularly have been supportive of the China-India Research Initiative. This book has, in a way, grown out of a number of conversations that I have had at different points in time with a lot of colleagues. They include my very good colleagues in the East Asia Institute, Professor Chen Yongnian, Dr. Chao Hong, Dr. Saratong, and many other scholars, Dr. Narayan at ISAS, my friends and colleagues from India, and also in China, particularly Professor Yao Yang in the Peking University, and several other scholars from Fudan University, from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and elsewhere. I am very grateful to Professor T.N. Srinivasan for being here today, not only because he is here at the end of a very arduous long journey, but also because my generation of economists have grown up on his writings, and he's one of those who was the first to start the comparative assessment of China and India from a macroeconomic perspective. I'm at Professor T.N. Srinivasan here today and launched the book. I'm equally grateful to Professor Wang Ganggu He is one gentleman whom I can safely say knows China and India both better than at least I do. I am finally extremely grateful to all my colleagues at ISAS, and I really cannot single out all of them. But all that I can say is that it would have been difficult had I not been at ISAS to write this book, because ISAS provides an extremely pleasant environment for doing research, not always in a planned manner, but in a very engaged manner. And there are numerous conversations, not always in a very pleasant manner, but in a very spirited manner, which add to the inputs that go into the book. I thank Routledge, the publishers, for doing an excellent job and for finishing off the book at a remarkably fast speed, particularly Yongling, who has been coordinating with us, and she tells me that the book is doing well, which I'm happy to note, like all author. And finally, last but not the least, my wife Poroma, who has been, in a way, probably most instrumental in finishing this book off, because she ensured that I kept the deadlines on my mind and ensured that I finished them off. So the publisher should be more grateful to her than to me for finishing the book on time. Thank you so much, all of you. I hope those of you get to read the book. You'll find it not a waste of time. I'll be most grateful for your most valuable comments and feedback. So, thank you so much.
It is with great pleasure that I now invite Professor T.N. Srinivasan, Yong Pung Hao Chair Professor, the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and Professor Wang Gongyu, Chairman of the East Asian Institute, on stage for the launch of the book. Ambassador Palit to join us on stage for this photo.
First, thanking Professor Palit for his kind remarks about me and also inviting me to release this book. And there is no question the bilateral economic and political relations between India and China are going to be the major determinants of what's going to happen in Asia and also the world as a whole. Professor Palit's book in detail discusses the issues, but I thought I would highlight primarily two issues. One, which he rightly mentioned, the phenomenal growth in the trade relations, bilateral trade relations between India and China. It's not so long ago the largest single partner, trade partner for India was the United States, not China. Today, China is the single largest trading partner for India. And that gives you in a capsule the phenomenal growth that has taken place in a very short time. The second thing is, as an Indian, I get a bit disappointed when I see the substantial progress in trade matters that China has achieved relative to India. For example, the share of global exports, China's share is 10.4%. China is the single largest exporter in the whole world. India is roughly the 20th with 1.4%, 10.4% and 1.4%. The second feature is the dynamism of China. Like all developing countries, it started out with exporting labor-intensive manufactured goods, like all the contemporary developed countries of the world once did. But it has currently it has dynamically responded by shifting its trade patterns away from the labor-intensive goods to more and more sophisticated manufactured goods. And same dynamism, to the same extent you don't see in India. And so there is a lot that India would compete with, but also learn from China. And this is something which is, as I said, at one level as an Indian is disappointing to me. But on the other hand, it's that it gives an opportunity to learn for India, to learn from China, along with many other things. Thank you.
Yes, I'm delighted to be here for this occasion because I know how hard Dr. Palit worked on his book. He's an extremely modest man. When he came to Singapore, he was continually talking to all my colleagues about something which is very mysterious, and that is the economic rise of China. Mysterious to me because as an undergraduate, I always thought economics was pretty mysterious anyway. But when it comes to the economy of China, it is even more so. Because it seemed to me that all the economists all have trouble understanding what's happening there. So what chance have I got to understand about the Chinese economy? I do know one thing though, that almost everything that I know about China's development stems from political developments. So this is because I know little economics and I have observed the politics a little bit more. But I do think one point that does need to be said is that while Professor Srinivasan mentioned all these remarkable dynamic changes in the Chinese economy, there's very little doubt in my mind that the role of the state has been extremely important. And so in many ways when we talk about a comparison of India-China economies, we are really also comparing these two states. The nature of politics in India, the nature of politics in China, and the kind of political decision-making, the kind of political will of the leaders of both countries, and how they regard the priorities that are necessary for economic development. And that is another story. But anyway, for all that, Dr. Palit has given us a lot of, thrown a lot of light on the subject, and I look forward very much to reading it, and I want to congratulate Dr. Palit.
Thank you, Professor Wong, Professor Srinivasan. Can I request Ambassador Pillai to take his seat at the head table, and in the meanwhile, may I also invite now the panelists to join the Ambassador at the head table.